This topic is solving two-step equations with the distributive property. You have two options when you are solving this. One will be faster than the other. However, it is whatever you are most comfortable with should be the one that you use. So for option one, I'm going to divide first. Right now, if I have 3 touching a parenthesis, this means to multiply. So the opposite of multiplying by 3 would be to divide by 3 on both sides. When I divide the left side by 3, the parenthesis, that x plus 2, stays the exact same, and my 12 divided by 3 is going to change into a 4. Now it's going back to the one-step problems. I want to isolate my variable, which means I need to get rid of the 2. So when I subtract 2 from both sides, I end up with x is equal to 2. So option 1 is to do the division first. For option 2, you're going to do the distributive property first. So I'm going to take this 3 on the outside. We said that if it's touching a parenthesis, that means to multiply. So I'm going to take this 3 and multiply it to the x, and I'm going to take that 3 and multiply it to the 2. So I end up with 3x plus 6 is equal to 12. Nothing happened to the 12 on the outside. Now I want to isolate my 3x. In order to do that, again, I put my box around the 3x, and I'm going to get rid of the 6. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. When I subtract 6 from both sides, I'm left with 3x is equal to 6. So then the last thing I would need to do is to isolate my variable, the x in this case, by dividing it by 3. So when I divide both sides by 3, 3 divided by 3 gives me a 1, or a single x, and 6 divided by 3 gives me 2. So in this case, you did the distributive property first and the division last, as opposed to the first option when we divided first to get rid of that value in front of the parenthesis. Another example would be with a fraction in front of your parenthesis. So the original problem was 2/3, and then in parentheses x plus 6 is equal to 8. We said if you had a fraction attached to a variable, you would have to multiply by the reciprocal, and that's the same thing that we're going to do in this case. So when I multiply by the reciprocal, I get 3/2. 3 times 2 is 6, 2 times 3 is 6, so together 6 over 6 is going to give me 1. On the right side, I also need to multiply it by the reciprocal. So remember to write your whole number as a fraction. So now when I multiply them together, I end up with my parentheses starting off is now going to come here. So I have x plus 6. 8 times 3 is 24. 1 times 2 is 2. And now I'm going to need to reduce. And when I reduce it, I get x plus 6 is equal to 12. I still have to subtract by 6. So the last thing I need to do now is subtract, and I end up with x is equal to 6. Last thing, by getting rid of the fraction first, you won't have to work with fractions later. So the preferred method is option 1, this one, where we divided or got rid of that coefficient first. However, when you're working with fractions, please make sure that you get rid of this fraction first, because if I were to distribute this, you would end up with 2/3 x and some other value when you multiply it by 6. So again, by getting rid of fractions first, you don't have to work with them later on.